What is the deepest, darkest secret you discovered about a friend? Not really a very dark secret, but I had a friend that had many friends outside of school. People would always call him and ask him to hang out every day. Turns out he had an app that would fake call you with the names you put in. He would have actual conversations on the phone, with no one on the other side. Obviously, he felt that having no friends or girlfriends outside of school was embarrassing. Edit, just search for fake call. There will be multiple apps for this purpose.
That's an interesting situation. Your friend went to some lengths to create an illusion. It's kind of common to feel the pressure to fit in and have a social life. I guess he just found a way to cope with that. Using an app to simulate friendships is definitely a unique approach. It makes you think about how people deal with loneliness in different ways.
This girl I knew in high school who was on the same rugby team as me. Ever since the spring season started, she began showing up to practice more and more infrequently. Coaches always told us to stop asking about her and never said anything against her not showing up, while giving shit to other players who skipped/slacked off. Cut to our quarterfinals tournament in a couple of weeks, and she finally shows up, except she's crying. She's still determined to play though, and plays aggressively well against the other teams. I find out after that she lived in a physically abusive household, and she finally got emancipated that week. Throughout the 2 years I had known her, she never gave any indication of anything like that, and as far as I know, no one else knew what was happening either. It came as a total surprise to me and really opened my eyes, because it made me wonder for the first time if anyone else I knew was being covertly abused at home. Edited because I can't spell.
That's a tough story. It's really surprising how people can hide their struggles and still show up like nothing is wrong. I can see how it would make you rethink everyone's situation, especially those you see every day. Sometimes, it takes a moment like that to realize you never really know what someone else is going through. It also shows strength in the face of adversity, which is pretty powerful.
One of the funniest, most enjoyable guys to be around in high school had a paraplegic brother who was slowly dying throughout our time together. Only found out after we graduated and lost contact that he even had a brother and that he had died a few nights before prom. Really put a different perspective of all the memories we had together and the fun times we had, all the while he was quietly dealing with this by himself. Really hit me hard when I found out.
That's a tough story. It's surprising how people can go through heavy things while putting on a brave face. It's a reminder that everyone has their own battles. The way your friend maintained a sense of humor and connection during that time shows a lot about his character. It's sad to think about what was happening behind the scenes while you were all just living life. Makes you appreciate those moments more.
I had a close friend in the 8th grade who clearly had an extremely strained relationship with her mother. Constant fighting, defiance, anger, etc. Any semblance of a bond was simply non-existent. I always wondered what was up, but in my youth, chalked it up to, well, we all hate our parents. One day, during a phone conversation, I don't know what topic of conversation preceded it. Her voice began to crack, and she told me, when I was 9 years old, in the summer, my mother told me I was out of control and needed to be helped. She drove me to a hospital, and before dropping me off, told me I'll visit you on the weekends. It was a mental hospital, OP. The needles they used on those people when they freaked. I stayed there for a few weeks. My father had to fight to get me out. I don't remember exactly what I said, except that I was so sorry. Mostly, I just wanted to hug her until she didn't need to cry anymore. This pops into my head from time to time. We lost touch. I hope life is treating her okay.
It's tough to hear stories like that. Sometimes we think our problems are small, but others carry heavier burdens. It's wild how much impact those experiences can have. I mean, a child shouldn't go through something like that. I can't imagine the kind of strength it took for her to share that with someone. I hope she's found some peace, wherever she is now. It really makes you think about how fragile our connections can be.
A colleague I'd been friendly with for 5+ years faked having cancer. Shaved head, gaunt makeup, even a cane. I'd always bring her meals, wear the solidarity ribbon, offer to cover for her if she wasn't feeling well and needed to go home. Finally, one of the other faculty members informed me it was all a ruse. They all knew and had stopped feeding into it years ago, but whenever they confronted her about it, she denied it.
That's a tough situation. It's crazy how someone can go to such lengths for attention. I mean, to fake something as serious as cancer shows a lot about a person's character. It's hard to process when you genuinely care and support someone, only to find out it was all a lie. It's a reminder to be cautious about who we invest our time and emotions in.
One of my best friends has a severe hatred/fear towards tools. After her noticing me noticing it, she finally told me about it. Turns out her brother tried to kill her several times growing up. He's gotten arrested multiple times for assault with, and without weapons, etc. Their mom was essentially a single parent, and rather than dealing with it, she just told her he was only playing and wouldn't actually do it. Nothing like insane siblings in good parenting.
That's a tough situation. It's wild how family dynamics can shape a person. Her brother's actions and their mom's response must have been really confusing for her. It makes sense why she'd have a strong reaction to tools. It's a reminder of how important it is to address issues instead of brushing them off. People carry those experiences with them in ways we might not always see.
I worked at a coffee shop with a woman who was considerably older than myself. She's the most lovely, kind-hearted, and friendly person I've met, and she was sort of a motherly figure to me. I don't know how this came up in conversation, but one day, she told me she cheats on her husband with her ex-husband every chance she gets. I just don't know how to feel about that.
That's an interesting situation. It's always surprising when you find out something unexpected about someone close. She seemed like a genuine person to you, but then suddenly there's this secret life. It's a reminder that everyone has their complexities. You can still appreciate her kindness while recognizing she has her own struggles. Sometimes people don't fit neatly into the boxes we create for them.
My childhood best friend's mom was Miss Perfect. Always had the best snacks made for play dates. House was perfectly neat. Hair perfectly combed. She was everyone's softball coach, Girl Scout leader, class mom, everything. My mom said when she used to see her when picking his kids up from school, her mom's breath always smelled perfectly mini fresh. Like she was so perfect. I am in college now and recently attended her funeral. She was a raging alcoholic. Her breath always smelt minty fresh from mouthwash to cover up the stench of her drink. She literally killed herself with alcohol. So sad. Literally what seemed like the perfect woman was killing herself over the span of 10 years. I have no idea what she was going through to this day. RIP. Edit. I used literally twice get off my case.
That's a pretty heavy story. It's wild how we can see someone as perfect and not know what's really going on behind the scenes. The contrast between her public image and reality is striking. It shows that we often don't see the struggles others are dealing with. It's sad that it ends this way, reminding us to check in on those around us. Life can be more complicated than it appears.
I went to high school with a guy who turned out to be a child molester. He was wanted by Interpol for human trafficking as well. In school, he was a nice, quiet guy who always showed up for whatever he was involved in. We were in a few clubs together, and I never, ever picked up on an odd vibe. I feel like I'm pretty good with reading people, but this is the one that completely got by me.
That's a heavy story. It's wild how you can think you know someone, and then find out they're completely different. It makes you question your judgment. Life can really throw you surprises, some not so good. It's a reminder that there's often more beneath the surface than you see.
I went to visit my at the time best friend, after we hadn't seen each other for a while. I asked about her smaller dog, who wasn't at the house anymore. Backstory about this dog. He was bought as a puppy, and when his owner was going through a divorce, he put the dog in a basement, and the only interactions he had with people were ones of abuse. So over time, he became aggressive toward people. The original owner was putting him down, and my friend decided to rescue and rehab him. She had him for a couple of years, and when I went to see her, he wasn't there anymore. So when I asked what happened, she apparently had gotten pissed that he peed on the carpet, decided to drive him to a dirt road by the airport and leave him there. She laughed when she told me that he ran after the car. You know, in a way where you could tell she expected me to find it funny too. I was livid, shaking, left and never talked to her again. If that counts exactly, but it fucked with my head and still does.
That's a rough story. It's tough when you think someone has a good heart, and then they do something like that. It shows how people can surprise you in the worst way. You really put a lot of trust in friendships, and it's hard to see that trust broken. I get why you cut ties. It's one of those moments that really sticks with you. Some things you just can't overlook.
I had a friend who told me he killed a guy. I'm not sure I believe him, but I can't understand the mentality of making that up to impress me either. Edit, details for those asking. He said he beat up the guy in a street fight and didn't stop until he realized the other guy was dead, so he found some cinder blocks and chains at a construction site and threw his body in the river. I know the city, the river, and this story, and that's about it. I was uncomfortable and drunk, so I changed the subject quickly.
That's a wild story. Sounds like your friend is either lying or in some serious trouble. It's strange how people go to such lengths to impress others, especially with something so dark. I get wanting to change the subject. It had to be unsettling to hear that. Sometimes it's better to just not dig deeper into those kinds of stories, you know? Keep it light and move on.
I had a friend from work who was older than me. We worked on the bar and spent a lot of time together and became good friends. He had a twin brother who he always wanted me to meet. He used to like a party and would often tell stories of mad acid-fueled parties he had been to, and we often went out and had a few wild ones. He was a friendly, upbeat guy, but used to change in a second's notice and became unbearably angry and rude. He used to have these mood swings quite regularly, and I started to notice that when he was happy, he would refer to his twin brother as the more serious one, and when he was angry, his brother would be the upbeat and happy one. One Christmas, he bought his family in to show them the restaurant we were working, and his brother never came nor existed.
That's a wild story. It's interesting how people can have such different sides to them. Your friend seemed fun but had this darker flip, which can be tough to deal with. The twin brother thing adds a layer, too, like he's projecting or something. Not meeting his brother must have felt odd, especially since he talked so much about him. Sounds like a complicated friendship with some good moments and some rough patches.
While this isn't a secret, my friend rarely talks about it much. He used to be homeless, and once in a while he'll say a couple things about it. One day we got on the topic of the rapid rate gentrification and the observable signs of it in our city, and he said that he observed that the howl was gone. He said that when he was homeless and would sleep on the streets at night, he'd hear this collective howl of the other homeless people. A howl of having absolutely nothing in the world and the feeling that there was absolutely nothing to do about it. He said he used to hear it when he was out late at night, but as of recently, it was gone. I still don't know what is more terrifying, the howl or the sudden lack of it. Edit, better word.
That's a heavy story. It's strange how the sound of a shared struggle can fade away. The way he describes the howl makes you think about the loss of community in tough times. When gentrification takes over, it's like erasing the history of those who were there. The silence now might mean there's less understanding or acknowledgement of their experiences. It's definitely unsettling to think about the implications of both the howl and its absence.
I found out my so has a fetish for morbidly obese women. I'm talking rolls upon rolls. Probably 600 lb plus. He doesn't know that I know. I have been trying to lose weight, and he keeps poking fun at my strange diet. I feel like he isn't going to be attracted to me when I reach my goal weight.
That's a tough situation. It sounds like there's a disconnect between you and your partner. You're putting in effort to change, but he seems focused on a different preference. It can be unsettling to think someone's attraction is tied to something you don't relate to. Maybe it's worth having an honest conversation with him about how you feel, just to clear the air. Communication is key.
I knew a guy since freshman year of high school, and then we were roommates for 2 years in college. Nicest guy you could ever meet. Turns out he was a major drug trafficker. When he was finally caught, they ended up seizing something like $200,000 worth of cash and prepaid debit cards. The entire time I knew him, I had no idea. He drove a 10-year-old car. We lived in a pretty crappy apartment on a mess side of town and still took out student loans and had a used car loan. Just blew my mind someone so nice and modest could be into something like that.
That's a crazy story. It's wild how someone can seem so normal and still hide a life like that. You think you know someone well, but then you find out they have this whole other side. Makes you question what people are really like behind closed doors. It's a reminder that appearances can be deceiving. Definitely a shocking experience, losing trust like that. Glad you found out before things got more complicated.
That she was a user. She used other people to her advantage, mostly monetarily, but also emotionally. She'd get with guys she knew liked her and have them buy her expensive things before breaking things off with them. I found out accidentally when she had a little too much to drink one day and gleefully told me what she'd done while talking shit about all those guys, calling them stupid, annoying, etc. We've been best friends for 2 years at that point, and I had no idea she was even capable of doing such things, because she'd always treated me well. I cut her off completely, and to this day, she still emails me occasionally telling me of her woe is me stories. To think that I called her my best friend.
That's rough. You think you know someone, and then they show a different side. It's crazy how someone can seem genuine but use people for their own gain. It's a tough lesson when it comes from someone close. Cutting ties was probably the right call, but it's wild that she still reaches out. Sometimes, people just surprise you, and not in a good way.
I used to work with this guy who in secret was some kind of online investigator for hire. The dude never really wanted to hang out outside of work, but after a little joking around, I got him to open up. He showed me his little workstation he used. He would tell me the kinds of stuff he found out and how easy it was for him to get the information. It made me worried about my own security, although the guy was actually really nice, and I honestly believe he was a good person nonetheless. But hearing some of the stories really gave me chills.
That's an interesting scenario. It's wild how people can lead these double lives. The fact that he was so good at finding information really raises questions about privacy. Even if he seemed nice, the stories he shared must have made you rethink your own online safety. It's a strange mix of being impressed and unsettled by what people can do behind the scenes. Glad he was on the right side, though.
My husband's colleague and good friend of ours was caught on the very first episode of To Catch a Predator. After the episode aired, we thought back and realized we had met with him on the day after he was caught. I remember asking my husband if he was okay, because he seemed upset. Little did we know, my husband spoke to him after the episode aired. He swore that this was the first time he ever did something like that. We never saw or spoke to him again.
That's a heavy situation. It's wild how you can be close to someone and not really know their side. The guy seemed normal, but then everything flipped with that show. It must have been strange seeing him act like nothing was wrong right after. Your husband's talk with him probably didn't help either. It's tough when someone you know goes down a completely different path. Just makes you think about how people can surprise you.
Back in high school, there was this kid that used to hang out every now and then with my group of friends. I suspected the kid was gay due to his mannerism and way of talking at times, but you could tell he tried his best to hide it. One day, he walked over to us, and I asked to borrow his cell to make a phone call since mine had died, and he passed it over without thinking twice. I flipped it open, and the first thing I see is a picture of a guy's penis he had been looking at. So, I just exited the pic and placed my phone call, but he was obviously horrified at what had just taken place. After the phone call, I handed him back the phone, and he promptly left. Next day, he avoided looking my direction in class, and the usually cheerful guy was quiet and withdrawn. He was like that for a day or two, and I realized he was scared that I might say something or judge him for what I saw, etc. So I approached him and spoke with him as if nothing had happened, and he began acting like his old self soon after. We never spoke about it, and I had never said anything to anyone until now.
That sounds like a tough situation for that kid. It's interesting how something so small can really shake someone up. I can see why he was worried. You handled it well, though, by treating him normally. It's important to create a safe space for people to be themselves. Sometimes, just being supportive without making a big deal out of things can help a lot. It's a reminder that kindness goes a long way.
So my senior year of high school, we had a student teacher in our government/economics class, which was interesting because this particular teacher didn't care for having them. Told us he hadn't had a student teacher in years, but this guy had all sorts of recommendations and academic achievements. Dude was born a valedictorian. Quiet dude, a little dorky, but otherwise fine. He led the class a few times. As the semesters went by, we all got to know him, and he was still quiet and dorky, but we all got along well. Cut to the summer after senior year, and he pops up in the state newspaper, arrested in conjunction with a human trafficking ring. I went to high school in Arizona. Holy shit, you know?
That's wild. You think you know someone, and then they just flip the script. It's crazy how someone can appear totally normal, and then be involved in something so dark. I remember a friend of mine had a similar experience with a coach who got caught up in a scandal. Just goes to show that people can surprise you, sometimes in the worst ways. You can't really judge a book by its cover, I guess.
When I was in middle school, my best friend went to a different school from me. There was a girl in his class that he was secretly in love with, had been for years. She was pretty, athletic, and well-liked, while he, like me, was a bookish nerd. In 8th grade, she died in a car accident. Occasionally our schedules would be different, and I'd have a day off when he had school, so I'd visit his school and pretend to be different made-up characters, basically just using a fake name and saying I was from out of town. So I knew a few people from my friend's school who didn't know that I lived nearby and saw him all the time. After my friend's crush died, one of these people, who had been close with the girl who died, told me that she had to tell me a secret, one she could only tell me because I lived far away and didn't really know anyone involved. She told me that the girl who died had also been secretly in love with my best friend. It's been almost 20 years now. He's still my best friend, he's married, and I've never told him. I never will.
That's a heavy story. I mean, it's wild to think about unspoken feelings and how life can change so suddenly. Your friend probably still doesn't know that someone felt the same way about him. It really makes you think about the things we keep to ourselves, even from those closest to us. Some secrets are just meant to stay buried, especially when they involve people we care about.
A friend of mine came out to me. I always thought that I wouldn't really care, but as it turns out, it took me a little while to actually accept it. Outwardly, I was super supportive because I knew he was going through a tough time, finally letting people know something that he had kept buried for a long time. I knew rationally that my knowledge of his sexual orientation meant nothing about the person he was and still is, but it took time for me to process. Everything is the same as it was before, except now I know my friend really trusts me.
It's interesting how things change when you learn something new about someone. At first, it felt like a lot to take in, but the important part was being there for him. I appreciated that he chose to share that part of himself with me. Over time, it just became another piece of who he is. Our friendship didn't really change, but it definitely deepened in a way. Trust matters.
I had a friend who I hung out with all through high school and most of college. He wasn't all that creepy, more annoying. Though on more than one occasion, he tried to discuss moral gray areas with me. I always shut those conversations down. Sophomore year of college, I get a Facebook message from a girl who I butted heads with in high school. She was also friends with this guy and told me to watch my back. She was house sitting for him while he was away, and she was using his computer. She found a hard drive full of naked photos of herself and many other women in our acquaintance. Many were taken through bedroom windows, others were taken at parties after the girls had passed out. I was not among them, but she said he hadn't stopped talking about me lately. I had a class with him, and he would not be avoided, so I confronted him. He admitted everything. I never spoke to him again. I still get chills when I think about how often he tried to get me smoke or drink with him alone.
That's a wild story. It's creepy how someone you thought you knew can turn out to be so different. It's good you confronted him and cut ties. People can really surprise you, and not always in a good way. It's a reminder to be careful about who you trust. That tension with the girl adds another layer. Some friendships can be more dangerous than they seem. Glad you're okay, though.
I got bullied very baldy in middle school by a kid. He was the reason for me attempting to take my life. In high school, I came out as gay, and nobody really bullied me after that. I was everyone's favorite homo. The bully and I sat next to each other in history class. He was gone often and would tell people he was skipping. He had these bumps on his arm that were fluid-filled, and he said they were from a four-wheeler accident. I pulled him aside one day and told him I knew he wasn't being truthful. I said, "I know those bumps are from dialysis. I'm here for you. I won't tell anyone else." He broke down and came clean about everything. He needed a kidney and found out in middle school. That's why he picked on me. He didn't know how to deal with it. We're really good friends now, but knowing that he was a kid trying to deal with possibly dying was crazy.
It's wild how life works out. The kid who bullied you turned out to have his own struggles, which makes sense why he acted that way. It's cool you reached out and became friends. Sometimes people just don't know how to handle their issues, and it comes out in the worst ways. Your ability to be understanding probably helped him a lot. It's a reminder that everyone has their battles, even if they don't show it.
When I was in grade 3, I used to hang out with this kid. His name escapes me, and my parents used to be really weird about us hanging out. Always told me to be with an adult and never hang out with him alone, etc., etc. We were neighbors in our townhouses. I hung out with him once alone, and my parents were livid when I told them. We were only friends for about a year, as we ended up moving away to a new province, and when I was old enough, my parents told me I wasn't allowed to hang out with him because he molested other children. He seemed so normal, and we were so young. No idea what happened to him or anything.
That's a heavy story. It's strange how childhood friendships can feel so innocent, yet there's often more to them. Parents usually have that instinct to protect, but it's hard to understand when you're young. It leaves you confused about trust and the people you think you know. It's a real eye-opener about the complexities in life. A lot of weight for such an early age, for sure.
Not much of a secret to a lot of the family besides me. And not that we had been super close as we got older, but it really screwed with my head a bit to learn my cousin had been dealing with a heroin addiction for 3 years, including rehab and relapses, and no one ever really told me until I overheard on a car ride and asked about it later.
That sounds tough. Finding out about a family member's struggles can hit hard, especially when you feel out of the loop. It makes you think about how much we don't know about each other's lives. Sometimes families keep things quiet to spare feelings, but it can leave others confused. It's rough when you realize someone you care about is going through so much, and you wish you could have known earlier to provide support.
I started to play WoW in BC. I think I was 16 at the time. Maybe 15. Anyways, I got into a guild with some people older than me, obviously, but I played a lot and was really into the guild. We had a vent channel, and the leaders would run me through instances because they were capped. I knew they were a little weird, but I never thought much of it. A couple of years later, I had moved to a different world to play with IRL friends, but I went back to my old tune on Maligos to see what was up. My old guild leader's boyfriend was online, so I wrote him to see what was up. He explained that his now ex had gone full-on crazy. She stole all her roommate's money. He was the guild's co-leader, and he was forced to rejoin the army because he had nothing. She stole her ex's, the guy telling me this, car and drove it into a river, then went Mia or something. I know it's not murder, but I played days worth of League with this girl. Shit was crazy.
That's a wild story. It's odd how people can change. I remember being in a clan in a similar game. Everyone seemed cool at first, but then drama unfolded. People started falling out, accusations flew around. One guy even ghosted after claiming he was being stalked. It was just a game, but things got messy fast. Makes you wonder how well you really know people online. Sometimes it's just better to keep it casual.
A notorious loner in my class would always have an MSN Messenger chat window up with one of his friends every time he hooked his computer up to the projector whenever he was to present a PowerPoint presentation to the class. He would act all embarrassed that we saw his conversations with friends from another town. He moved here from that town, as we assumed he really was staying in touch with his old pals. Until one day, when he was in the library on a computer, and I spotted him logged on to his friend's MSN and messaging himself. Sometimes he would speak of the things he and his friends did, and ever since I caught him messaging himself, I felt really bad for him. He was a very, let's be kind, peculiar kid, not one I'd really be interested in being friends with, but I always treated him nicer after that.
That's an interesting situation. Seeing him messaging himself must have been a bit awkward. It's kind of sad too, just trying to maintain a connection that wasn't really there. I get why you felt compelled to be nicer after you realized what was going on. Sometimes, that little insight changes how we see others. We don't know everyone's story, and it can make a difference in how we treat them.
A friend told me he had cancer. He said he couldn't put it on his parents, so he was going to try and hide it and go through it himself. I have had 2 different types of cancer, so I asked a few too many knowledgeable-ish type questions. He finally said he made it up. Don't think he even lasted a year. Didn't really bother me, as I'm pretty sure it was just a lie he decided for some reason to need at some point, and then just couldn't find a way out. Then again, I'm a guy that mez off most stuff.
That's a wild story. It's tough to see someone go through that, even if it's not real. I guess some people just feel like they need to create drama or attention. I can understand why you didn't take it hard. Sometimes you just have to shrug things off. Everyone has their reasons for lying, but it's good you could look at it without getting too affected. Just keep doing your thing.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.